Yesterday, I completed my re-ranking for Rattata in Pokemon Yellow, and today I'm going to play Tangela. For a while, I was thinking of putting these two Pokemon in the same video and seeing how they would go head-to-head. Because if you think about Rattata, I think most people expect it to deliver bad results. It's a first-stage Pokemon that you catch on Route 1, so it should be weak, and it doesn't have a great base stat total. On the other hand, Tangela is a single-stage Pokemon, typically which are quite good in the mid to early late game, and its base stats in Generation 1 are quite good. 65 HP, 55 attack, 115 defense, 60 speed, and 100 special, which is great for a mono grass type when all grass type moves deal special damage. Its speed stat gives it an 11.72% chance to crit in Generation 1, it has a medium fast growth rate, so it's not hamstrung by a slow growth rate like, for example, Arcanine. So far, so good, but this is where everything falls apart for Tangela. It starts with Constrict, and that is it. It has a base power of 10, an accuracy of 100, and a 33% chance to lower the opponent's speed. I think this is the worst move in the game. I know that other moves like Razor Wind are really bad, and there's some super glitched stuff like Whirlwind, but those moves either just don't do anything at all, or they do decent damage after one turn of doing nothing. Whereas Constrict just always does bad damage, and with lower physical attack than special attack, I have to rely on this terrible move until level 24, where Tangela learns Bind. Another move that as a kid absolutely drove me up the wall because it wasted so much time. However, now that I play on 4 times speed, trapping moves are actually pretty good in Generation 1, especially if you outspeed the opponent, because unless your Pokemon is missing, the enemy is never going to get an attack in. But Bind is also the worst trapping move when compared with Wrap, because its accuracy is only 75% instead of 85%. Now, I want you to look at the move pool right now. Constrict level 1, Bind level 24, and I'm going to switch the right-hand side of the screen over to red and blue. Yeah, in those games, Tangela can learn Bind at level 1, which obviously makes the early game significantly faster and easier. Tangela's awful early game is a yellow version exclusive. Now, Game Freak seemed to have realized this, and they ended up making its level up moveset slightly better than in red and blue. In that game, it learns Absorb as its only grass-type damage-dealing move at level 29, but in yellow, we get Absorb at level 27, and then Vine Whip at level 29, because it really doesn't make any sense for the Vine Pokemon to not learn Vine Whip. Still, Vine Whip only has 10 PP in Generation 1. It's kind of a bad move. It is nowhere near as good as Razor Leaf, and that move is nowhere to be seen on Tangela's set. Beyond Vine Whip, we get Poison Powder, Stun Spore, Sleep Powder at level 39, then Slam, and finally Growth. Although I don't think Growth is going to be useful since I have to wait all the way to level 48 to get access to it. And through TM and HM, Tangela has a better option. Swords Dance paired with Body Slam. The other notable moves here are Mega Drain, Solar Beam, and Mimic is of course going to see a lot of play. This moveset is also so bad that Cut seems like it might be useful in the section of the game where you only have Constrict and Bind. But remember, in Generation 1 there is no move deleter, so once you teach Cut, you can never get rid of it. If you've watched me play with other grass types in Generation 1, this is all going to come down to the exact same moveset. I like to call it the Victory Bell moveset, since this is my tier list, and Victory Bell is an outstanding Pokemon. It finishes the game with Swords Dance, Body Slam, Sleep Powder, and Mimic. You might think that this doesn't give me moves to attack Agatha's ghosts with, but don't worry, Mimic solves that too. It's also a little bit weird to have no damage-dealing grass moves on a grass-type Pokemon, but Swords Dance is just so good in combination with Body Slam and Sleep Powder that you don't need anything else. Okay, let's start talking about my Tangela playthrough. In this video, I am only going to be showing my final run with Tangela, since I've already released a video ages ago that talks about my very first playthrough with it. Go and check that out if you're curious to see me suffer and how far the channel has come in terms of production quality. Back when I recorded it, I didn't even have a dynamic overlay. I was still just making all of the graphical elements of the videos in Photoshop. I came back to this Pokemon, and over the course of 2 days, I played 3 playthroughs with it, as well as consulting with Zealous Pawn and a bunch of notes that the community had provided on my Discord server. Also, I do need to mention Redriosi here, because he has done so much work in the early game routing out Tangela and figuring out the fastest way for it to get through Brock. And that's really what this run comes down to. I don't think it's a spoiler to talk about the final moveset at the beginning of this video. It's obvious what Tangela is going to do in the late game. The biggest problem for this Pokemon is how do we get to level 27 to learn Absorb? Once we get there, things start speeding up, and then by the time I get access to Body Slam and Sleep Powder together, the rest of the run essentially can just be done on minimum battles with minor tweaks for optimization along the way. But the early game, on the other hand, is incredibly complex. Here's footage of me beating Brock the last time I played Tangela on the channel. It took me 1 hour, 19 minutes, and 31 seconds. I defeated him at level 23 using only Constrict. Today I have a really weird goal. I want to beat the entire playthrough faster than my previous Brock split. So let's see if Tangela can do this entire run in under 1 hour and 19 minutes. I'm optimistic right now. I do think that it's going to be possible, but it's going to require a radical shift in how I'm approaching the early game. Now, I don't know if everyone is a fan of the game chess, but I played a lot of it as a kid. Yeah, I was a nerd. I'm a 33-year-old man playing Pokemon games for a living. What do you expect? Anyways, at Chess Club, they used to always set up these late game scenarios for us to learn the game with, like a king and a rook versus the opponent only having a king. And then we would have to sort of solve this mini puzzle to figure out how the basic pieces of the game worked. There's of course another way to learn chess, which is memorizing openings that have specific tactical ways to win the game quickly, like the 4-move checkmate. However, if your opponent then knows how to block one of these tactics and you do make it to the late game, in the case that you only have a king and a rook left over, maybe you're not going to be able to win against the opponent very quickly because you haven't practiced this specific scenario. Or maybe you end up in a scenario that's slightly more complex, like he has a king and a pawn and you have a king and a rook. If you've played out those late game scenarios, then you know exactly what to do in that situation. And I think this is an analogy for how Tangela's early game works. If you want to start playing Pokemon Yellow solo challenges, I would highly recommend that you learn and optimize your early game by playing Tangela. This Pokemon has so much to teach us about the early game. If you don't want to be spoiled on the insights it has to offer up, turn off this video and come back to it later after you've figured out Brock. I want you to get a time that is under 25 minutes, and more ideally a time that is close to 23 or 24 minutes. By the way, you can reset against Brock, that is totally allowed, and you will still get a time around this area. If you're getting times that are like 27, 28, 29 minutes, then you know that you still have things to figure out in the early game. Alright, so that's the puzzle. Now I'm gonna spoil how it works. Up until now, we have been watching B-roll footage from my first playthrough back with Tangela. I have done that specifically so that you can watch footage where I have no idea what I'm doing in the early game. Now we're going to start watching footage from my third playthrough with this thing. As soon as I spawn in the overworld, I'm going to collect the potion from my PC. I am going to be collecting every single potion that is available for free in the overworld. The rival inside of Oak's lab can be beaten by Tangela, although it's incredibly unlikely. Constrict is going to 21-shot the Eevee, so his Pokemon would need to spam Tail Whip or Miss Tackle over and over and over again until eventually you chip him down. Since it is possible, there is a chance that you get a massive speed boost from this first battle should you get the extremely lucky outcome. I am not going to bank on this happening, I just assume that Tangela is going to lose this fight, and of course in this playthrough it does. Route 1 is where I have to start making decisions. If I run into a wild Pokemon, I want to run away if it's anything above level 3, because right now Tangela is going to seriously struggle knocking these Pokemon out. There is the possibility to defeat, say, a level 3 Pidgey or a level 2 Rattata, although they don't give very good experience yields. In my experience playing this challenge, I think the player should run away from every single encounter on Route 1. They don't give good enough experience, they damage you, and that's likely going to force Tangela to either use a potion before reaching the forest, or you're going to heal, which will replenish your Constrict PP. And it is imperative that I keep Constrict's PP as low as possible throughout the early game for as long as possible. Struggle is by far the better move to be using with Tangela. On my second trip into Viridian City, I am going to stop by the mart and pick up some potions. Initially, Zealouspawn told me that I can skip these, but after playing a bunch of failed attempts at the early game, I do think that picking them up now in Viridian City is slightly better and more flexible than picking them up in Pewter City. But this is a compromise, since if you do your entire buy once in Pewter City, then you will save a little bit of time overall in the early game. I'm taking this compromise because once I make it to the forest, the trainers are absolutely awful. The weakest person in here is the first bug catcher, and he has 2 Caterpie that are level 7. Tangela can't beat their Pokemon using Constrict Constrict at level 5. So I either need to battle wild Pokemon or fight the mandatory bug catcher at the end of the forest, who has one level 10 Caterpie, which I also will not be able to defeat with Constrict. So the best option right now is to fight wild Pokemon, but I need to run away from every Pidgey that I run into since they're going to do too much damage using Gust, even though it's a normal move, and I won't be able to knock out some of the higher level Pidgey since they can use Sand Attack and really mess Tangela up. Ideally, you're running into Metapod here because they have better experience yields, and they also help you deplete Constrict fairly quickly since they're setting up with Harden. During my time in the forest, I'm also going to grab the hidden antidote as well as this Pokeball. I can sell these later to buy myself one more potion and extend the duration of struggle. If you're experienced with the early game of Pokemon Yellow, what you'll realize now is that the most efficient way for me to train during this section of the game is blacking out to the Diglett trainer inside of Brock's gym. I can then repeat trainer boosted experience over and over again until I finally defeat his Sandshrew. Unfortunately, in Tangela's case, since it doesn't have a status move, there's going to be no option for me to extend this training indefinitely. But I wouldn't want to either, because once Tangela reaches level 14, his Sandshrew is only going to do 2 damage per hit, and then each battle takes so long that blacking out would just be inefficient. But until I reach level 14, he is going to give the best experience yields. But there are 2 criteria that I need to satisfy before I start fighting him. Number 1, I have to be able to defeat the mandatory bug catcher, and number 2, I need to be able to knock out his Diglett without losing. If I just black out to the Diglett, then I simply lose time and I gain no benefit. Plus, using Constrict, it doesn't make a lot of sense to save before him and then just reset if the Diglett is going badly. Instead, I would just restart the entire playthrough should I lose to the Diglett. Initially, Zealous-Pawn thought that once we get to struggle, we just battle the first bug catcher, gaining trainer boosted experience, pushing us towards level 8. Then at level 8, we can fight the bug catcher at the end of the forest. By doing this, we will have level 9 for the junior trainer, which is the level that's needed to knock out the Diglett. Then Diglett train from level 9 until level 14, at which time we're going to backtrack through the forest fighting the trainers that we have skipped until this point. I want to make a really important note here, which is early into this I thought that maybe training with Constrict and saving my potions in struggle for later was the more efficient way to do things. This is absolutely not the case. I need to be using struggle as soon as possible to level Tangela up quickly. Then, once I finally do my blackout training and have to use Constrict again, it will be the second time that I am depleting the PP fully. And when I'm using Constrict at a higher level, 14, I'm going to be doing more damage to the enemy Pokemon, knocking out each wild encounter more quickly. I played both approaches in the early game, and my split with the strategy training with Constrict early on ended up being 4 minutes slower. The result isn't that different between the two because I also ironed out some other things in my follow-up attempts, but it is still a major contributing factor. So training with struggle early on is the key. Okay, now let's get back to talking about the first bug catcher and fighting him with struggle as soon as you get to this move. When I first started playing this strategy, it seemed like it was going to work. I had a replay file that Zealous-Pawn showed me where he beat the bug catcher at level 6, and then I tried it and lost to him 6 times in a row. This forced me to start experimenting with higher levels against him, 7 as well as 8, and both of these didn't work. I just kept losing. So what I have to do instead is fight the mandatory bug catcher at level 8, and this is the first trainer that I am going to beat in the entire playthrough. And then I can go to Pewter City and do all of the blackout training. Prior to this, it is incredibly important that I heal Tangela in the Pewter City Pokemon Center. This is so once I black out, I teleport back here and I have a short trip to the junior trainer. If I didn't heal here, then I would get teleported all the way back to Pallet Town. Another thing, if I haven't done my Mart trip yet, I want to stop by the Mart and pick up some items. In this case, I can do that still because I've earned a little bit of money from the mandatory bug catcher, as well as the money from selling the Pokeball that I collected in the forest. This gives me exactly 200 Pokedollars, which I can use to purchase 2 antidotes, and they are so important as soon as I beat Brock. Okay, time to battle the junior trainer. It is possible to get lucky here and battle the junior trainer 1 or 2 extra times should his Pokemon get critical hits and knock out Tangela more quickly. But as you can see, in the first battle that I get to level 14, I'm able to knock out his Sandshrew. This is 13 blackouts, and I think that that is the standard number against him that Tangela should be getting. Okay, let's talk about the next major barrier, which is of course Brock. In order to defeat him, we have to really carefully consider risk and reward. I could be consistent and level all the way to 20 for a very easy battle against him, or I could play slightly riskier and fight him at level 18. The problem with the level 20 strategy is just it's not worth it. Even if I black out many times to Brock with the level 18 strategy, Constrict is just not going to train fast enough to get me to level 20. And with the lower level strategy, there's the possibility that I beat him on my first attempt, and that gives Tangela the ability to achieve an outstanding first split. Well, outstanding in comparison to what happens if you just train with Constrict mindlessly. On my way backtracking through the forest, I am going to fight trainers that I haven't defeated up until this point, with one exception. I do not want to battle the trainer that has 2 Metapod and 1 Caterpie. He is the second bug catcher inside the forest. I am going to fight the yellow version exclusive trainer. I can battle him just with Constrict. It takes a while, but his Metapod actually depletes this move more quickly. Then using Struggle at level 14, I can defeat my nemesis, bug catcher number 1, and I can continue backtracking to the lass at the beginning of the forest, defeating her for a little bit more trainer boosted experience. One question I still have about this route is, does it really make sense to backtrack now to Route 22 and fight the rival? Tangela's level 15, so even though the Spearow has Peck, I'm not worried about it. In this playthrough, I did decide to backtrack to fight him, but I could see it being the case that this is actually too inefficient because you're spending a bunch of walking time when you don't have a chance for an encounter. So maybe sometime over the next 2-3 years, people will figure out that this battle is actually not that efficient for Tangela, or maybe it is the right choice because trainer boosted experience is always nice. With him defeated, we should talk about a weird quirk in Generation 1. In future generations, there's always an NPC that gives the player your first 5 Pokeballs, but in Generation 1 it doesn't seem to be the case. But that's not true, because if you defeat the rival here on Route 22, and you only have 1 Pokemon registered in your Pokedex, you can then return to Pallet Town, talk to Professor Oak, and get Pokeballs. Oh, there's also one more requirement for this. You can't currently have any Pokeballs in your inventory. So it's fine that I picked the one up in Viridian Forest earlier, provided I remember to sell it in Pewter City. I thought at first that getting these 5 additional Pokeballs would be great for Tangela, because then with the money I'm earning from the trainer battles now, I can sell them and buy myself more potions, extending the time I can train with Struggle. But this didn't end up being the case. With a Pokemon like Alakazam, it can make sense to do this, but that's because you have access to teleport, and you can quickly move around to the last center you were at, most likely Pewter City, or potentially Pallet Town if you haven't healed at all during the playthrough because you're using only teleport and kinesis. Alakazam is another one of these Pokemon that's great for learning the early game. Instead of getting the Pokeballs with Tangela, I'm going to leverage a different tactic in the early game. Now, one key here is that you need to keep about 4 to 5 potions in your bag at this point in the run. Do not continue struggling here. Instead, I'm going to fight wild Pokemon until my HP drops down around 25, and then I fight the second bug catcher. This way, Struggle Recoil will knock out Tangela and I won't win against him. Because of that, I am teleported back to Pewter City, and I can also re-battle this bug catcher for more trainer boosted experience once I get back to Struggle. For this reason, it is also very important not to catch yourself any HM users in the early game, because then you can't efficiently black out. And if you manage to knock out his Caterpie, which I didn't here, I needed slightly more health and I didn't want to use a potion in order to get it, so I have to take the blackout. But if I had knocked out the Caterpie and then fainted to the Metapod but I had a Pidgey in my party, the Metapod would never knock Pidgey out, since its only move is Harden, and in Generation 1 the AI Pokemon do not have PP. From here, we just rinse and repeat, until I'm partway through level 17. This is the critical moment to start using Struggle to train again, as well as burning those potions that I've saved until now. With Tangela, it makes no sense to fight Brock using Constrict, and leveling to 24 for Bind is far too inefficient. If I haven't saved enough potions to heal for this duration of Struggle training, then I'm gonna have to fight Brock at level 17, which will reduce my damage against Geodude by 1. And I really don't want that to be the case because the battle against Brock is pretty inconsistent. Unfortunately for me, I did slightly miss time things. I wanted to save one of the potions in my bag, and I didn't fight one extra wild encounter. This is just me not watching what I was doing. I went to fight Brock, battled him at level 17, realized this was a mistake, lost once, even though I could win here, so I tried anyways. After that, I went back, fought one wild encounter, leveled up to 18, and then started fighting Brock for real. You might have thought to yourself, why not just black out to Brock's Geodude, get the experience from it, and then come back and fight Brock at level 18? Well, that doesn't work because then I have to deplete Constrict again, which means I would have to find Metapod in the forest so that I don't lose any health on my way to Struggle. One of the key factors of making this early game as fast as possible is depleting Constrict the minimum number of times. So unfortunately for Brock, I can't black out, I just have to reset here if the fight goes badly. There's some upside against Geodude because it can miss tackle occasionally, only, and I can also critical hit with Struggle. Against Onyx, it really comes down to one thing. I want him to go for Bide as little as possible until he's very low on health. Then I want him to use Bide because I can knock out the Onyx before it unleashes energy. If he uses Bide early into the battle, then I'm not going to be able to win because my health will be too low to continue using Struggle. Sometimes I'm not sure if I'll be able to knock out the Onyx, so I continue playing and end up blacking out to it, as was the case in this battle. I went down to 1 HP and then Struggle knocked out Tangela, but in the next fight I realized that I was going to lose earlier on, so I just reset right away. Putting all of this together, 3 resets to Brock, one of which was player-induced, I am still able to beat him on my 4th attempt, and get a first split of 24 minutes and 4 seconds. If you're somehow interested in tryharding this early game, then your goal should be to beat my time. I assume that it won't be very difficult if you just do a few attempts. However, if you want to play more casually, I think anything under 30 minutes is a pretty good Tangela split for the early game. If you're getting a time over 30 minutes, then I think you really do need to reorder how you're doing things in the early game. Make sure you're not using all your potions when using Struggle, and make sure that you're using Struggle as early into the run as you can. Now, speaking of Struggle, it continues to be Tangela's best move for Route 3, where the early game optimization has to continue, because the awfulness that is the opening of this run is not done. Brock is only boss number 1. There is still another battle that is absolutely terrible. I find it truly hilarious who it is, so I'm gonna leave you in the dark for a second as we start preparing for that battle. First of all, right away after beating Brock, I need money to buy potions so I can make it through Route 3 as quickly as possible. Healing now and then continuing to use Constrict over the next section of the game is not going to be as fast, but it also means I would have to get back to Struggle before the next really difficult battle. The only way to get more potions now is to sell Bide. Then I could purchase 7 more, but I decided to sell some antidotes and purchase myself an 8th because potions are really important for the next section of the game. I need to use 3 right away to get Tangela to full health before I fight the first bug catcher on Route 3. Also, I'm going to save before all of these battles in case anything goes wrong. In Generation 1, Struggle can Gen 1 miss, so I could take extra damage from Tackle and then end up blacking out in one of these cases. Also, the Weedle here can poison me, which is the reason purchasing antidotes earlier is so important. I need at least 1 in my bag to be able to get through this battle, but ideally I would have more. With this battle complete, I'm only going to use 2 potions because the 3rd one wouldn't be as effective in its healing, and I want to make sure I am squeezing every HP point out of each individual potion. Luckily, the following battle isn't as difficult, but I did want to take on the bug catcher on this route for more experience. However, I have too few potions left over in order to do this. So instead of fighting the bug catcher next for better experience, I'm gonna battle the lass who has only 2 Pokemon. Tangela can just barely make it by her, heal with the remaining potions, and then defeat the final bug catcher on the route. There are going to be consequences to me updating the route here. I will have to improvise a little bit in Mount Moon, and I'll talk about the consequences of that in one moment. First of all, inside of Mount Moon, I am not going to battle any trainers. Instead, I'm going to pick up items that I can sell so that I can buy more potions after backtracking to Pewter City. The items that I pick up in Mount Moon are the Water Gun TM, this potion, which is over to the side of the Water Gun TM, this potion by the Super Nerd, as well as the Rare Candy and the Escape Rope, then the HP up. I also go all the way into the cave to pick up the Mega Punch TM. This one is not strictly required, Zealous Pawn wasn't picking it up, but I thought it was good to get it just because extra potions are helpful. Also, with my updated routing, I'm going to need to fight a few more trainers in Mount Moon now because I need extra experience. So having more potions for that will be important. Also, I have a new foster cat right now, and if you're used to recognizing Churro's meows in my videos, today it's not actually Churro that's disrupting this voiceover. Selling all these items lets me buy a total of 24 potions. Okay, time to talk about the really difficult battle. Hilariously, it is Jesse and James inside of Mount Moon. Ekans has super effective damage with Poison Sting, and it can also poison you before their other 2 Pokemon. Ekans can mess you up with Leer so that Meowth does a ton of damage with Bite, and then Coughing's super effective Smog does a lot of damage, and it can also once again poison you. Having an antidote here is critical so that if you get poisoned during the fight and somehow survive, you can still make it to the Cerulean City Pokemon Center to heal. If the Ekans poisons with Poison Sting, it is just a reset no matter what I do to prepare with Tangela. But I also tried to get by them at level 20 and 21 in my previous attempts, and Zealous Pawn lost a total of 8 minutes here in his first playthrough with Tangela, and even if I fought every single trainer in Mount Moon, all of the people that give terrible experience yields, I still think that this fight has the chance to be difficult. To make them as easy as possible, the plan for this run was to use one rare candy prior to them, going from level 21 to 22. It's not over a damage rounding threshold, but it does give Tangela just enough HP to pull through with a win. The issue here is that I fought the bug catcher on Route 3 on my way back to Mount Moon, and then the two trainers that I was supposed to fight in Mount Moon don't line up my experience well. I was planning to battle the super nerd over by the rare candy, followed by the mandatory super nerd, which will get me to level 21. But I realized I would have more experience this time because I fought both the lass and the bug catcher. If I fought only the lass and not the bug catcher, I didn't think I would have enough experience, so I decided to add in some optional battles. And this snowballed out of control. I fought this bug catcher, then I was realizing that I'm going to need even more experience, so I had to fight the last two. Then Tangela wasn't level 21, so I took on the youngster to ensure that I would have enough experience to get to 22 without the rare candy prior to Jesse and James. Otherwise, all of these battles have been for nothing. And then when I beat the super nerd, I was so close to 22, but just not quite there. So unfortunately, I am off the plan. Luckily, I have a level up right after the Ekans, so I still get the HP points for this battle. Now, Jesse and James are not easy. Really, what I need to have happen here is the Ekans go for Leer, and then the Meowth go for Scratch. Ideally, after that, the Coughing will miss a Smog, and this entire time I will not get poisoned. If I get the status condition from the Ekans, I instantly reset because I can't win if that happens. And in the ideal scenario, this fight is so close. So it happens after 2 resets. Then Ekans misses a Leer, which is perfect. I knock it out in 2 turns. Meowth comes in. It goes for Bite, which is not a great scenario, but I still have 30 hit points remaining for the Coughing. It does go for Smog, luckily not poisoning, and then I tank damage from 1 more tackle, and I knock it out with Struggle, surviving Jesse and James with 3 hit points. Tangela has now made it over the extremely steep early game hill. There's only 2 more fights that I need to take now before I'm going to get access to Bind. Inside the Cerulean City Gym, I fight the swimmer as well as the junior trainer. And even though I was off my experience pathing, this all still works out, getting Tangela to level 23, where I use 1 rare candy to boost it to 24 to learn my second move of the run. With it, and the fact that I'm really over-leveled, the rival on Nugget Bridge is not that difficult. Unless you miss Bind on the Sand Shrew and then it hits you with Sand Attack, which is exactly what happens here. I miss so many times during this battle, and it ends up taking way longer than I would have liked. But this is really a blessing in disguise, because now I have a good way of demonstrating to you how Tangela is slowed down in the next section of the game. Bind doesn't have a lot of PP, and if it's missing consistently on Nugget Bridge, you're going to have to go back to the Pokemon Center multiple times to heal Tangela before proceeding. Backtracking like this is going to cost somewhere in the range of 20 seconds, depending on how far you have to walk back to the center. So here's the ideal plan for the next section of the game. Fight the 5 trainers on Nugget Bridge, as well as the Rocket, all of which are mandatory. For the next section of the game, we fight the Hiker to get the Elixir. This can help out with Bind. We only need a single Elixir for the Pokemon League, so using these PP restoring items earlier on to skip center heals is a good way for Tangela to gain time. By the time I would finish Route 25, I wouldn't have enough experience to get Absorb at level 27, but then I would fight the Rocket outside of Cerulean City and go into Mistiy's gym after that. Defeating her Staryu would give me access to Absorb for her Starmie, and Bind is pretty good at knocking out her Staryu. It does between 6 and 8 damage per hit. Plus, Tangela has the outspeed. Then Absorb 3 shots her ace. With my current run, I have 1 extra rare candy because I did the training in Mount Moon. So once I beat the Hiker to get the Elixir, Tangela levels up to 26, and I just immediately use my rare candy to get access to Absorb, making the final portions of Route 25 a little bit faster for Tangela. Plus, Mistiy is easier now. With Tangela's early game behind us, now the pace of this video is going to dramatically speed up. I think I'm going to explain everything that follows this in the playthrough in less time than it took me to explain the early game. Also, Churro and the Foster are now chatting to each other through the door. The Foster's in quarantine because they usually have little respiratory infections when they come out of the shelter. But yeah, it's quite disruptive, so I'm going to take a small break, get the cats fed, and then hopefully they'll rest. And speaking of TM44, we're not going to be picking it up with Tangela. The items in the SSN that I collect are the Body Slam TM, obviously I teach this right away, and then the Gentleman Candy. Once I defeat the rival, my Tangela is going to be level 30. This is where the two routes are going to finally align. With the optimal early game route using earlier rare candies, I would have only been level 29 here, and I would have used one rare candy to be level 30 before Surge anyway. The damage rounding threshold here doesn't help against the Raichu. I have to 3-shot if I'm level 29 or if I'm level 30. The only reason to use the candy prior to Surge is because then level 30 helps against the Rapping Lasso's next. Without the candy, Body Slam has a 25.3% chance to one-shot the Oddish, exposing Tangela to the awfulness of Stun Spore and Wrap in combo. But at level 30, Body Slam has an 88.7% chance to one-shot the Oddish. With these odds, it doesn't make sense to save in front of the Rapping Lass. In Celadon City, I'm going to be skipping the Rocket Hideout entirely, going straight for the department store. Here, I purchased myself 2 Carbos to improve Tangela's speed. To this point in the game, I've kept Bind on my moveset, and that's just because it makes catching a Doduo for Fly a little bit easier. In Generation 1, you can interrupt multi-turn trapping moves with an item use, so once the Doduo falls to low health, I can just use a Great Ball. On my first attempt back with Tangela, I took the standard approach to the next section of the game, going to Pokemon Tower next. This is a terrible idea. Instead, Tangela needs to fight Erica using Bind and Body Slam together to get through the fight. This is fairly slow, and the reason I'm doing it this way is because I want to avoid Bind from her Tangela wasting a ton of time, or Constrict lowering my speed, so that I can't move first against either the Weepinbell or the Gloom. If that happens, then they move first with Acid and have a chance to lower Tangela's defense. Also, Acid is super effective, so if they progressively lower my defense, there is a chance that I lose to Erica if I'm not going for Bind. But with the trapping move and Body Slam, she's just slow to defeat. And with her out of the way, I can then teach Tangela Mega Drain, which is the key move for Pokemon Tower. It's not great against the rival, since for this playthrough he is going to be choosing the Vaporeon team, which is by far the most uncommon team for me to go up against on this channel, since you have to lose to him in the lab battle in order for him to pick this team. Even if I'm paralyzed here, and if my accuracy gets dropped all the way to -6, Tangela still wins here, even though the fight took forever. Okay, so Mega Drain is incredibly important because Agatha Jr. is actually terrifying for Tangela. In my first playthrough back with it, I had like 6 resets here because Vine Whip and Absorb were just not good against her team members. The fact that I can gain back health and deal slightly more damage when using Mega Drain is very important for success. Even though I'm playing the safer strategy, I still end up resetting here once because of Confusion, Paralysis, and Nightshade. But luckily, I'm able to get by her on my next attempt. Jesse and James this time around are not difficult. The only battle that was problematic for Tangela is the one in Mount Moon. With the Rockets defeated in Pokemon Tower, I can now go to Silph. This is the 3rd spot in the run where everything changes. Number 1 was when we got access to Bind, number 2 was when we got access to Body Slam, and now we can get Swords Dance. Before that, I fight the Machoke Trainer, the Stacked Scientist, the Protein Scientist, and the mandatory Arbok Rocket to get the card key. Then I pick up Swords Dance, teach it in the place of Bind, and I use 2 rare candies, leveling up through level 39, learning Sleep Powder on my way. By the way, I think there's room for a little bit of optimization here. I could fight the Arbok trainer first, get Swords Dance, and then use it against the optional trainers that I fought, but I didn't think about it when I did this playthrough, and I'm not going back to do another one. 3 with Tangela over the course of 2 days is enough, and I've done a total of 4 now. I think I've put in enough time. Rival 5 is pretty simple, but there's a subtlety that I want to mention here, which most grass Pokemon don't have to deal with, and that is that we want to put the Sandslash to sleep. It's going to be spamming Poison Sting, but since we're a mono grass type, we don't have a secondary poison type to make us immune from the status condition. This is why sleep is important. I don't want to get poisoned and then have things fall apart, because I am underspeeding the Ninetales and the Kadabra at my current level. And the Vaporeon only has a 40.7% chance to get knocked out, so it could use Aurora Beam once. This battle didn't go particularly well for me, but it's a good example of why the status condition against Sandslash is so important. After damage from the Ninetales and the Kadabra, Vaporeon does attack once with Aurora Beam, and because of it, I get taken to low red health before finishing the battle. If I was poisoned, this would have been a loss. Inside Koga's gym, only mandatory trainers. From here, there is only going to be one more optional battle. Koga can be annoying. Because Tangela is a grass type, it's going to go for Toxic and it can poison me on turn 1 if I miss Sleep Powder. I just reset if this happened. I didn't actually calculate this out, but I think I might survive poison damage since it doesn't accumulate if I'm knocking out his Pokemon, and after setting up with Swords Dance, I'm going to. Either way, it's a fast reset. I come back in, Sleep Powder works, then I set up with Swords Dance, and with +6, I sweep his team. No optional battles over the next section of the game. But before Blaine, I am going to use 4 rare candies to go from 44 to 48. During this, I don't teach Growth. It comes way too late in the playthrough, and Swords Dance is just better. Against Blaine, there's a bunch of ways to lose. Essentially, I just have to get lucky with Sleep Powder early on against the Ninetales. Then set up Swords Dance, which badge boosts my speed, and after that, I can use Body Slam to knock out all of his Pokemon. I think I got kind of unlucky here at the beginning of the battle, hitting myself in confusion, but still everything works out for me. Ninetales even lands a Flamethrower, bringing Tangela to red health, but from there I'm fully set up. I one-shot the Ninetales as well as the Rapidash, move on to the Arcanine. This Pokemon is going to take 2 hits, so I put it to sleep with Sleep Powder, then use Body Slam, and over 2 turns I finish off the Fire-type Specialist. Inside the Saffron Gym is where the final optional trainer in the run comes, although today I can skip him. Normally this would have been the Psychic with 4 Pokemon, but since I skipped the rare candy earlier on, I'm going to have 2 in front of Lorelei instead of 1, and that'll allow me to get Tangela to level 54. In my first playthrough with Tangela when I fought Sabrina, I was speed tied with her Abra. This is what happens if you don't buy Carbos or pick up overworld items. I was trying to save as much time as I could, just because Tangela wasted so much in the Brock split, and I figured that Sleep Powder and Swords Dance together would trivialize everything else. But I do like buying some Carbos, just so after 1 Swords Dance I also outspeed the Kadabra. Then the Alakazam outspeeds, but it's not going to do enough damage. In the end, Sabrina's pretty easy. Minimum battles through the Viridian City Gym. Giovanni is also simple unless the Dugtrio messes you up early on with a Fissure or a Sand attack. Today he's sponsored by Guard Spec. I put the Dugtrio to sleep, set up with Swords Dance, and from there I sweep his team. Also, the Nidos have no moves that are good against a mono grass type. For example, here Nidoqueen goes for Double Kick. Rival 6, this is the same scenario as before. Sleep Powder for Sandslash, set up with Swords Dance, then sweep his team. The level up in the middle of the battle here after the Execute is a little bit annoying so that the Kadabra outspeeds, but this time around the Ninetales doesn't. Today I did get a critical hit, so it survived and went for Ember, but this doesn't change the outcome of the battle. Also, this Vaporeon is so much worse than the one in Silph. It knows Haze, Mist, and Acid Armor, and Hydro Pump is not very effective, so this Vaporeon is just gonna spam status moves. I have to say, after the rival, it's a little bit frustrating seeing that my experience is so close to level 53. I thought for a moment about what's gonna be most efficient. Do I fight a wild Pokemon before Victory Road? Do I fight a wild Pokemon in Victory Road? Or do I pick up the candy in Victory Road, which costs roughly 9 seconds? In the end, I decided to fight a Pokemon here in the grass just before I make it into Victory Road to level up to 53 so that I can skip the rare candy here. No additional trainers, now let's head into the Elite Four. Strategically, Lorelei is really simple. Put the Dugong to sleep with Sleep Powder, then set up with Swords Dance, knock it out with Body Slam, and then knock out the Cloyster using Mega Drain. From there, Body Slam for the Slowbro as well as the Jinx, and finally on the Lapras, since Body Slam can't one-shot, the safest way to play is with Sleep Powder, just in case it freezes you with Blizzard or gets a critical hit. Unfortunately for me, I miss Sleep Powders and it's able to attack with 2 Blizzards, knocking out Tangela. This was a frustrating reset. I'm just really glad that I didn't get another one. This guy is so easy. Then Agatha is slightly annoying. I have to mimic a move that can hit ghost types here, and either Lick or Wing Attack will work for Tangela. Because of confusion from Gengar, she switches in her Golbat and then uses Toxic. I just reset this. I didn't want to get messed up by something like Hypnosis later into the fight and then have a long battle that goes sour. Instead, I just come back in, don't get poisoned, set up Swords Dance, mimic a move, and then sweep through her team. This is overall a really simple battle, even though you can lose. But when you do, it's typically earlier on, unless the final Gengar messes you up. I think I might be playing slightly risky against it. It's probably safer to Sleep Powder it before attacking, but after Swords Dance, I 2-shot with Wing Attack. Lance is Sleep Powder, Swords Dance, Body Slam the first 2 Pokemon, mimic Ice Beam, then use it to knock out the Aerodactyl and the Dragonite. So we've made it to the champion, and everything I've discussed previously applies here. We don't want to get poisoned early on, so we're going to sleep the Sandslash, set up Swords Dance, and then sweep his team. Also, we get access to Earthquake from his first Pokemon, and because of this we have better damage than we have in all previous fights. Hilariously, the Vaporeon has relearned Aurora Beam, which is impossible in Generation 1 unless this is a different Vaporeon because there's no move reminder. Still though, an Ice-type move late into the fight doesn't matter. I don't even put the Vaporeon to sleep. I just attack with Earthquake, and while it doesn't one-shot, of course Vaporeon goes for Mist, and Tangela finishes the game. Today with it, in my third playthrough back, I get a time of 1 hour 13 minutes and 26 seconds, with 9 resets, 16 blackouts at level 59, with a game time of 4 hours and 34 minutes. In my first run back with it, I got a time of 1 hour 33 minutes and 52 seconds. So my new result is 20 minutes and 26 seconds faster. It's a big improvement, and I'm pretty happy with it. Let's come back to what I mentioned at the start of this video. Last time I played Tangela on the channel, I got a Brock split of 1 hour 19 minutes and 31 seconds. This was using Constrict, and I beat Brock at level 23. Today, I beat the entire game faster than I previously beat Brock. Okay, quickly before the tier list, I did fight Professor Oak with Tangela. This fight's kind of annoying since there's no good moves to mimic. Also, I'm leveling up at a really inconvenient moment right before the Arcanine comes in. Luckily, I can just not set up Swords Dance earlier into the fight, then use Sleep Powder on the Arcanine, set up Swords Dance here, badge boosting my speed, which makes Tangela move faster than the Charizard. Beyond that, it's a pretty straightforward battle. I did lose here a little bit, but in the end, Oak's not that difficult. So, where do these new results earn Tangela a placement in the tier list? Well, it's one of the worst fully evolved Pokemon, but it's not the worst currently ranked in my list. Right now we have Onix in the Bruno tier, and that's it. Tangela is the next best fully evolved Pokemon. Unfortunately, it's beat out by another fully evolved Pokemon in the F tier, Golbat, so today Tangela earns a placement in the middle of this tier, behind Krabby and Tentacool, ahead of Nidoran Female and Kabuto. I was forced to improvise a little bit during this run, and I also don't think my luck was exceptional. Losing to Lorelei specifically was quite painful. So I have another example of a really good Tangela playthrough from Zealous Pawn's experience with the Pokemon. He was able to get a time of 1 hour 7 minutes and 17 seconds. So if you're curious how close Tangela can go to 1 hour, it can get pretty close, but I think pushing it below the 1 hour and 5 minute mark is going to be quite painful. I expect that eventually someone will come along and get the sub-hour Tangela run, although I'm not interested in competing for that, because this Pokemon is very painful in Yellow. It is definitely one of the worst fully evolved Pokemon, and I think when I come back and revisit Aerodactyl and Onix, they're both going to perform better than it. But there is still one species that will be worse than Tangela, and I'll have to complete it later this year. If you support me on Patreon or through YouTube memberships, thank you so much, it means the world to me. Now, if you've made it this far, you're incredible. I'll see you in my next video.